All right, welcome back to the Animal House. Today's topic is going to be about the Younger Dryas Cataclysm. It's a fascinating and controversial topic in the realm of paleoclimatology and archaeology. It refers to a sudden and severe cooling period that occurred from 12,800 to 11,700 years ago during the transition of the Pleistocene to the Holocene epoch. And pay attention to those numbers because they're going to be important later on. This event is marked by a rapid return to the glacial conditions after a period of warming following the last glacial maximum. So we're going to go into a little bit of a deep dive into this topic. And I think it's important because for so long in, let's say, Western history, our archaeologists have told us that, humanity is 6,000 years old. But yet we now come to find out that we have these megaliths that are far older than that. And ever since I was a little kid, I've always been, interested in Atlantis and megaliths and things like that. And it just never made sense to me that, these things just naturally occurred and that, bronze tools were able to carve granite or, any of these hard megalithic stones because I knew that bronze and copper were soft and granite was really hard. And I even picked that up as a little kid, but I was never one to just believe what I was told. I think it's important to always question things and always have room for change in your opinions, or always have room for getting, more education and being able to, connect the dots. So I've been reading Graham Hancock's books since, the 90s. I've been reading Randall Carlson's work. I've listened to as much of them in either audio or video form for as long as I can remember. And then you have Robert Schoch, and there's plenty of these, not, I guess, accepted archaeologists, but these alternative archaeologists, just to make sure I keep both sides happy, that, I think have important and valid ideas. So let's go back into this. The triggering event. The leading hypothesis suggests that the cataclysm was triggered by a release of meltwater from a glacial lake, Agassiz, into the North Atlantic. So this was a massive body of water that, as it's been described, was 100,000 times all the flowing water on Earth released at one time. So all the rivers and all the lakes around Earth, Nile, Amazon, the Mississippi, everyone, 100,000 times that amount of water released at one time. So this influx of fresh water disrupted the oceanic circulation system, leading to a dramatic cooling event. Okay, so this would also lead us to believe that, knowing that back in that 12,800 to 11,700 years ago, that the ocean levels were 400 feet lower than they are now, and that 400 feet of global ocean water is now in the ice caps and going, both directions on the globe, right? So climate change, this would have been real climate change, not this faux climate change that all these blue-haired psychopaths keep talking about currently. The sudden drop in temperatures during the Younger Dryas would have had significant consequences on the ecosystem and the human populations. Many large mammals, such as mammoths, saber-toothed cats, faced extinction during this period, likely due to changes in vegetation and food availability. So you had a lot of your megafauna that were basically wiped out. You find places like the spot in Alaska that mining operation guy that's up there gold hunting is just finding, thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of, mammoth, saber-toothed cat, short-faced bear, giant sloth, all these bones and carcasses and things in a very, very concentrated area. So, that's all the way up in Alaska, which is in the tundra. And that would lead us to believe, also based on ice core samples that are taken in both the Arctic and the Antarctic, knowing that things were completely different back then. Then we get into things like what Graham Hancock, Randall, Carlson, and Robert Schoch are saying about some of these megaliths around the planet, specifically the Sphinx, and that there's thousands of years more of water erosion from like rain on those megaliths than what our current known history of roughly 6,000 years old being capable of. So to dumb that down, there's water erosion on these megaliths that disprove the current known archaeological approved age of humanity. Now, it is not, a far stretch. We know it to be almost 100% fact that archaeologists fight any alternate version of anything, because that would at least make them have to change their opinions or their ideas, or flat out make them wrong. We know the Smithsonian has been responsible for taking things and not letting them ever be seen again. And I'm sure Soviet, Chinese, North Korean, I'm sure that, probably any big government is, known to be doing that. We know that Ali Hawaz in Egypt has gone from, being very open to people coming to Egypt and trying to look at different ideas, to being very hard-nosed about, if you go in there trying to prove ancient civilizations or prove anything other than what he says is, Egyptology, that he's very, very specific and blunt and hard-nosed about that stuff. And that he's the leader of, Egyptology for the country of Egypt. So I'm not saying he's right, but I'm just saying that he has the power to do that. So the impact on the human societies, human populations at the time were largely hunter-gatherer communities, and abrupt climate change could have led resource scarcity and migration. So with the water levels rising, you have things like the Yosemite Monument in Japan that's underwater. It's very, very difficult to dive to because of the currents in that area. But when they do dive on it, there's a lot of staircases, right angles, very monolithic looking things. And as usual, modern archaeology is like, nope, it's natural. Well, nature doesn't typically do, not that it's never happened, but it's not common for nature to make 90-degree corners and completely smooth runs and things like that in giant rock. Then you have, these things that we're finding in the Amazon jungle with these flyover, LiDAR and this topo reading technology. You're finding these things in China that I think they said the last dynasty, they think, had buried these things because it didn't fit to their belief, their belief structure at that time. You have things like Göbekli Tepe and the other, buried cities in Turkey. Obviously, you have Egypt and the Giza Plateau. You have Central and South American, North American monoliths, things like that. So all these things are leading us to believe that humanity is far older than what it said. So what happened from then to now? And that's why I think this is an interesting theory. And Randall Carlson has traveled all over the globe looking for proof that this happened. And I believe he's got one of the best theories and supporting facts to go along with that. So, along with the impact, it's theorized that these environmental pressures may have contributed to the development of more sophisticated tools and hunting strategies as humans adapted to the changing conditions. So, food and shelter and land got more scarce. Seas rose. It pushed people off the coastlines. It made them have to adapt to different climates, different topographies. It made them have to become more nomadic to find areas that were able to be inhabited for them at the time. And it also made their food sources change, so it could have made it more difficult, where then instead of them just being able to, simply hunt things, they had to be more advanced. Bows and arrows, traps, snares, things like this. And over that time, we started to mentally evolve more. The Younger Dryas conditions with the end of the Clovis culture in North America, this cultural shift may be linked to environmental changes posed by this cataclysm. So we have all these times where, at least in my lifetime, things have been known to be fact, and then something will come out that'll prove that it got older and got older and got older. But when this topic comes up, the modern archaeology is like, nope, not possible. But more and more things keep coming out that prove this to be accurate. So potential technological innovations have potentially come from this too. The need to adapt to new environmental challenges, new technological stuff. And again, this is for food, resources, shelter, reproduction, human reproduction stuff. So humanity is pretty easy to get by simply if you're in a temperate climate and close to like a water source. You get food from there. You'll get mammalia coming that way. You'll get, fish, all different kinds of things. But the farther you go away from a water source, the more difficult things become. So with this shift, is that along with the rotation of the earth and the wobble, is that why we know that the Sahara Desert used to be lush and now it's not? And, the western part of Africa is this massive arid desert, but then you can find like seashells, snail shells, and, oceanic life shells in the middle of the desert. So not only did the water level rise, but with the shift of any land masses because of whatever impact caused this whole thing to happen, or whatever caused this to happen, they think it's some sort of an impact. But, the Gulf of Mexico, they've recently started to theorize was above ground at one time, but during roughly about this time, water started getting let in because the Gulf of Mexico was in like a dip in the land. So, a shorter mountain range at the one end, water levels rose, spilled over, made the Gulf of Mexico. Because, Cuba's an island. They've recently found off the northern coast of Cuba, there's a civilization or a monolithic, structures in that area that they never knew about before, that they accidentally found with, fishing nets. You have things like the Bimini Road that's underwater. You have that monument in Japan that's underwater. They recently found, Alexandria underwater off the coast and the port of Cairo. So there's all these things that support this to be pretty accurate. And then once again, let's go back. Every one of these civilizations has a flood myth in their past. And it was this cataclysmic flood myth from every one of the current continents that are there. So I think this theory is important to pay attention to. Populations may have migrated in response to changing climates and resource distribution. This could have contributed to the peopling of the different regions and the diversification of human population. So, we always like to go through back and forth between, the Fertile Crescent and the continent of Africa being the jump off point for human life. And, for the longest time, when I was a little kid, it was the Fertile Crescent. And then as I got a little bit older, they said, nope, it's from Africa. And then recently they've switched back to it being the Fertile Crescent again, and like the, the Caucasus mountain range. And then it kind of like, kind of pushed out from there as far as humanity goes. And then we all know nowadays with the 23andMe that we're all mixed, different ratios, but we're all mixed. So this theory of melanin content in your skin making you better, worse, or otherwise than anything else, no, that doesn't track. That doesn't scientifically make sense. I think culture has a lot to do with it, but I do not think that melanin does. So archaeological evidence, the Younger Dryas is associated with a layer of sediment known as the black mat, which contains evidence of abrupt environmental change as it is found at various archaeological sites. Sorry, I'm reading off my bullet points here. So, we know that like in the Amazon, the trees only root at the like surface level of the dirt, because below that the quality of the earth is garbage. So there's a pretty good hypothesis with a lot of science behind it that says that the Amazon potentially was completely bioengineered. And when you look at pictures, or if you go visit, you'll see trees fall over because of storms or lightning strikes or whatever, and their root mass is really shallow. So when the tree tips over, and goes flat, the root mass is sticking, up and down this way, and it's massive root mass. And you have massive diversity in plant life that's not seen anywhere else on the planet. But in other places, in these core samples they've taken in the ice caps and things like that, it's just like they were able to prove that when the Mongol hordes were traveling across the globe, they killed so many people that it actually changed the carbon footprint of the globe by single-digit percentages, which is insane to think about. So the modern implications of this, I think, are interesting too. So understanding past climate shifts, such as the Younger Dryas, can offer valuable insight to contemporary climate change. Studying how ancient societies coped with abrupt environmental changes may inform strategies of how we can deal with it in modern times. This is a thought experiment with facts behind it, but I think it's important for archaeologists not to be so hard-headed and be way more open-minded. These are people that went to school to learn about the past, and when new ideas or new proof or new technology comes up, they don't want to acknowledge it. And then on top of that, they want to attack or discredit or disassociate with the people that are trying to bring these thoughts to bear. So I think it's important just to keep this stuff in mind. So let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, share with your friends. Trying to grow the channel here. Thanks for listening.